West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Sahil, we're just learning that it is not just members of Congress and the media. It is also former White House counsel Don McGahn being spied on, according to the New York Times. What do we know?
Alicia, this will be a major test for Congress as to whether they draw a line around this, whether they look into it, and try to establish boundaries of behavior. I mean, it's quite extraordinary what appears to have happened under the previous Justice Department. We heard Chuck Schumer there calling on Republicans to join them in investigating this. That is significant in the Senate. We haven't heard much from Republicans yet, but it's a 50-50 chamber, and their support will be needed to issue subpoenas. One person to keep an eye on here is Chuck Grassley, the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee. He's someone who's known for taking his oversight role seriously under presidents of both parties. We had Speaker Pelosi telling our friends at CNN earlier today that the House will subpoena William Barr and Jeff Sessions, the two former attorneys general, and have them in the House to testify under oath about this. We'll see how this develops. We haven't heard a whole lot from Republicans yet, but it remains to be seen whether this will be something that Congress takes more seriously, or if it just gets wrapped up in the latest slew of partisan politics.
So, Jill, help me understand something. It is possible that McGahn was being targeted as an individual. It was also possible that he got swept up in a broader probe. Is that right?
It is. It may be that the person that they were investigating, assuming that there was any legitimate predication for the search warrants and that they actually had some reason to do this, it could have been that he got called by somebody that they were already investigating. It doesn't mean that this is normal. It is not normal. And I think that the investigation is absolutely critical. Holding someone accountable for this is important to stopping it from ever happening again. We can't have members of Congress, the press, and the White House counsel subjected to this. And the reason that Don McGahn is, of course, of concern is because he was cooperating with Mueller, which made him an enemy of Donald Trump. And Donald Trump was calling out both Schiff, he was calling out Swalwell, people who were subject to this search warrant. And he certainly must have felt uncomfortable with his own White House counsel, who was cooperating and telling the truth to Mueller. So that's why it's of concern.
Jill, you have both Barr and Sessions distancing themselves from this story. Sources say that Sessions says he was never briefed on the seizures of records. Barr says the same, that he never discussed the leak cases with Trump. Is it possible? Is it in the realm of possibility that none of these guys knew what was happening?
In my opinion, no. And let me tell you why. First of all, we have Ben Venuto, who was the special prosecutor brought in at the recommendation of the U.S. Attorney from New Jersey, who was the person selected by Barr to replace the Southern District of New York U.S. Attorney, who he was pushing out. Recommended Ben Venuto, who came in, and Ben Venuto has said, it's been recorded in reporting, that he briefed Barr at least every other week. So it is not credible. And if Barr didn't know about this, then Barr is the worst manager, the worst attorney general ever, because that is his job. Department of Justice policy requires that there be notice and approval from a higher source. So it's not something that you can just subpoena a member of Congress's records or a reporter's records without something much more. So it doesn't pass what I call the red face test. It's like, could I stand up before a jury and say this in front of them without blushing or giggling? The answer is no, I couldn't.
Eugene, I want you to take a listen to something Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said earlier today. Take a listen.
In addition to Sessions and Barr, any other officials who were involved must testify before the Senate Judiciary Committee under oath as well. There are many Republicans who always look at overreaching executive branch authority, and we're hopeful that they will join us in requesting this subpoena, in demanding this subpoena, actually.
Eugene, to loop back to where Sahil got us kicked off here, I mean, is there a chance that this actually increases pressure on Republicans and changes the contours of their thinking around this?
It's hard to say. I think that's probably the optimistic view on it, is that, you know, this will go above the partisan politics that we've seen. I think that, you know, we, like Sahil was saying, you have people like Chuck Grassley who take the oversight responsibility of Congress very seriously. You people hope that they are going to look at this and say, just like Senator Schumer was saying right there, that this goes beyond politics, that this is about the separation of powers in Congress and the White House. And that's something that, you know, no matter who's president, somebody's going to be upset about the overreach. And that's something that Republicans have been talking about a lot. You know, you talked about Democrats, like this is something that they have already been feeling in their guts, right? They've been telling all of us for 4 years that, you know, Donald Trump was using the DOJ or the DOJ was being used as a bludgeon against his political opponents over and over and over. And so the people that are caught up in this are those people, including eventually Don McGahn, his White House counsel. This isn't the first time that the DOJ has gone after leakers, right? It happens under both under administrations of Democrats and Republicans. But the biggest difference is this is about members of Congress while they're in their official capacity doing their official work. So Democrats have been telling us that they think there's a lot more here. They'll tell you that behind closed doors or on the record, there's varying amounts of optimism on what's going to end up happening. And they want to know what happened during those 4 years, because the only reason that we know anything is because Apple let lawmakers know last month, because the gag order was kind of expired there. So they're hoping to find a lot more information in some of these investigations.
Right. And Jill, this isn't just about what litigating what happened in the past. It's also about making sure that it never happens again, that these institutions are strong enough to withstand this type of action. I do want to ask you, there is sound from House Speaker Nancy Pelosi earlier today. Take a listen.
How could it be that there could be an investigation of other members in the other branch of government and the press and the rest too? Mm-hmm. And the attorneys general did not know. So who are these people, and are they still in the Justice Department?
Jill, suffice it to say, you know Watergate well. What do you see as the similarities and differences between this and Watergate?
Again, this is an abuse of the institutions of government by the people in control of them. Watergate was exactly that. The smoking gun tape was a conversation between the president and the chief of staff in which they said, let's use the CIA to stop the FBI from finding out that the money on the burglars came from campaign donations. That's clearly a political use of the authority of the Department of Justice, the CIA, the FBI, and that's what's happening here too. It seems to be, and we don't know enough, I don't know all the facts, no one does right now, but it does seem clear that the reason for this investigation was completely political. So far, it looks like, except for Don McGahn, it's not Republicans who have been subpoenaed, it was Democrats. Why only Democrats? Well, we don't know. Why was a minor and the family of people investigated? Was there any real evidence that someone's family member was making these calls, or that the member of Congress was using a family member's phone to avoid detection? These are all possible. The gag order is not unusual in a case like this, but it should have been lifted as soon as the investigation was dropped, which it was, number one, when Sessions said, well, there really is nothing here, and then it was revived under Barr, but clearly there was no reason to continue it because they never got anything that linked any of the people they were going after their records. So there's a lot of similarity to abuse of governmental powers, and that's a very dangerous thing.
It is Monday, the 14th of June of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is River City Hash Mondays. Oh, we slice and dice and we take everything that's left from the weekend and everything? Well, we take what is left from the weekend and we reconstitute it into, well, food for the mind. A gourmet extravaganza that we can really sink our brains into. Well, the G7 had their little confab, and that's a nice thing. I noticed that Joe didn't push any other world leaders out of the way. That was nice. You know, that's always nice. Looks like we're going to be having a little tete-a-tete with Vladimir Putin, who has already been, well, leveling charges. I don't know. He wants us to give up some of our folk for some of his folk. He'll give us some of his criminals who are trying to, well, I guess, muck up America. So he wants our criminals in exchange. There's some criminals in your government, and they've been attacking us, and we'll give you like a criminal exchange. So what are they going to do? Give us Navalny? He's already said today, after this, when Joe said, well, you know, maybe we can make a deal about you give us some of yours, we'll give you some of ours. Not realizing that, you know, there's not really any criminal enterprise from the United States trying to muck up the Russian mob state. Let's be clear, okay? There might be some military actors who are tasked in a military capacity to, well, I don't know, counter intel? You know, I mean, we are dealing with a hostile mob state, are we not? So, what is Vlad going to do? Who is he going to give us? Who does he consider a criminal? Well, I guess maybe Alexei Navalny. He did come out today and say, we can't guarantee that Navalny will still be alive when we give him to you. Look, he wasn't trying to mess up America, okay? He was just running against Vlad. And for that, he's in a gulag, been poisoned a couple of times, and pretty much they're going to just let him die. Let him? Maybe they'll help him along. That's how it works. Yeah, let's be clear. Putin is a thug. Nancy is right. He's a thug. So is Donnie. But when you're working your way up as an FBI investigator, you start with some small fry and you work your way up to the top. And I assure you, Donald Trump is not at the top. Vlad is. Okay? So, with that in mind, how was your weekend? Hey, it was lovely here. We had a spot of rain. We still have some rain today. That's great. Rain in June, in the middle of June here in, I don't know, the Devil's Anvil. Is that what they call it here in Southern Oregon? It gets pretty hot here in Southern Oregon. And that's okay. You know, we're in that sort of transition between the chaparral and the rainforest, I guess. We have a bit of a mountain range, or, you know, small range of mountains that separate us a bit. But there's a transition from Northern California into what people think of as Oregon. So it does get pretty hot here. And we had actually a nice weekend. And, my mom, I want to say, is on the mend. I had alluded to her health issues. and how her back is like corkscrewing. Her spinal column is corkscrewing. You know, it's one thing to have sort of like a wavy type thing in your spine, you know, which you can see on imaging, but when it's corkscrewing, that's bad arthritis. So no wonder she's been in, shall we say, a bit of a peak. Yeah, when you're in that much pain, it's similar to the old story of the lion with the thorn in its paw. It was pretty angry until it got the thorn taken out. So Mom has expressed some relief that the medicines that they are giving her have alleviated the pain somewhat. She tends to not want to take the more, shall we say, the narcotics that knock you on your butt, and then just kind of lives with the pain, and that's not good. She will be getting what's known as an infusion shot. I believe that's the term, infusion. Probably a steroid, and I am sure that's going to work. She'll go through a series of those, and there will be a shot that will last for about a year. So I'm looking forward to that. You know, Mom doesn't need to be in that much agony, and she doesn't need to be taking out on anybody else, too. So they never tell you how much it's going to hurt when you're an immortal. Oh, yeah. You're going to live forever, but it's going to hurt really bad. Thanks. Thanks for letting me know. No one lets you know until it happens. And then it's not like anybody let you know. You just found out. Wow, I'm an immortal. I'm living forever. But damn, does it hurt. And I scar, too. You get scars. They never tell you that. But you'll find out. You will. Okay. Speaking of getting old, you know, I have always been against ageism. Maybe because of my father, my professor father, who wrote the definitive books on old age politics. Yeah, old age politics in California from Richardson to Reagan. And he actually updated it, too. I think he got up to Wilson. Maybe Duke Majan. I don't know. Maybe it was only Duke Majan. We'll see. But regardless, he did have some newer editions. But the definitive book that he had out there in academia about old age politics or senior citizens' rights. He hated the term senior citizen. And so, but we kind of use it here anyway because everybody else does, and you're trying to communicate, and people don't know what the hell you're talking about. Anyway, because of my father's explanation about, well, how the family got fractured through industrialization, used to be that our households were multi-generational. It included grandma and grandpa. Might have included some, siblings who have gone off, got married, and come back. And they got their kids, too. But old people were considered to be quite a benefit in the family unit and also in the community in general in which they resided. And it was only when we became fractured because of industrialization, where folks left the farm, moved to the city, did we then get this idea that, old people are a liability. They're kind of, they're an albatross on our necks. They're holding us back. And so the concept of civil rights, human rights, individual rights for old people became more pronounced, and probably culminated, at least back when I was a kid, in a group called the Gray Panthers. So I've always been against ageism. I consider, well, now that I'm old, of course I'm going to consider myself a benefit for society. Please, can I be a benefit? Won't you let me? But ever since I was young, well, way before even junior high, is when I became aware of this bigotry against old people. And I didn't want to take part in it. And I'll tell you again, I'll just reiterate, it was because of my professor father. So I am a little perturbed when politicians like Nancy Pelosi are dismissed because of her age. It's about time we got somebody new. Those old people think old thoughts. Well, You'll see how it is when you get here, okay? Maybe you might not want to be railing against old people too much because I won't call it karma. Because we reduce karma to some weird transactional thing. Karma is just karma. But for an economy of language, I will say that karma can come back and bite you in the ass. I would take care. So let's stop with this ageism BS against Nancy, and I'll even say Grassley. One does have to take into account the competency of a individual, and maybe because of their age. But you know what? Nancy is not it. So stop it. Okay, she's 80 years old, and she's going like gangbusters. She can still kick ass. Okay, enough of that. What do we have in store for you here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy as we start off in the Bistro Cafe? Hey, Trump's DOJ spied on everyone. Everyone. His own counsel. Everyone. But we knew that. Donald Trump has admitted in public, as part of the public record, he has admitted that he gets revenge. And how he gets revenge is he digs up dirt on whoever it is that offended him, and then he hits them back. And this is his terms. His term. I hit him back 10 times as hard. You hit me, I hit you back 10 times as hard. So he had the power of the government behind him in which to be able to root around in people's lives. Even to the point of spying on their minor children. Remember all that rigmarole that you couldn't go after Barron? And people, not a whole lot of people that I deal with, we all kind of looked at ourselves and said, where did that come from? All of a sudden he's saying, leave Barron alone? No one's going after Barron. And now I think that, yes, as I said on the Tim Coromal show, if you haven't heard it this morning, you can pick it up on podcast. It will also be reprised on Netroots Radio today at 4, is that right? Yeah, 4 p.m. here on the West Coast, so that would be 7 on the East. But as I mentioned on the Tim Coromal show, I think that maybe because of Trump's projection, we ought to be looking at Barron's telephone to see who Trump was talking to for a back channel to Vlad. Who is he talking to? He's probably talking to Vlad. And he wanted to not leave a digital trail. I'll use the kid's phone. So everything that Trump does, he accuses others of doing, and he thinks that they are doing it like he does because he's a crook. Crooks always think everybody else are crooks. Okay? Because the crooks think they're good people, actually, and if they're good people and they're doing bad things, imagine what all the bad people are doing. They're doing really bad things. And that's how crooks think, and I guess I should mention that's also how Republicans think. Is there a difference between crooks and Republicans? I don't know. I'm having a hard time being able to tell a difference. Indeed. Well, on the rest of the menu, a federal judge threw out a lawsuit filed by employees of a Houston hospital system over its requirement that all of its staff be vaccinated against COVID-19. 100 and some odd employees said, we're not going to get vaccinated. And the judge said, actually, you have to. The FDA asked Johnson & Johnson to discard millions of COVID-19 vaccine doses from a troubled manufacturer. Tens of millions of doses have been approved and are part of our sharing agreement with the world. And, there's a troubled manufacturer, and I think we better, how shall I put it? We better tighten it up, please. And the AMA will hold its annual meeting as a group of white Southern doctors fight to keep the group from dismantling centuries-old racism and bias in all realms of the medical establishment. They're having a fight to keep the racist policies in place. Don't cancel it. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Nicaraguan police arrested and jailed 5 prominent opponents of President Daniel Ortega, including one-time rebel allies who denounced the detentions as an assault on democracy. And with a GDP about where Italy is, Joe Biden suggested autocrat Putin's Russia might be weaker than it seems. Even weaker than it seems with a GDP of Italy. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. The bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. Kelly is also making preparations for Netroots Nation this year in the District of Columbia. So I still haven't gotten word. She's been fairly busy in real life, but I haven't gotten word yet if Netroots Nation will actually have a radio or media row this year, maybe because of COVID lockdown protocols, or at least honoring some of those in spite of whether the protocols have been lifted. But we will be having, the similar interviews and reportage that we've had in past Netroots Nation, and thank you, Kelly, for doing that. If you would then look across the page from that chat room link that Kelly Lincoln monitors, to the left of the page from that chat room link is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, well, that allows us to pay our bills and do all the things that we do to resist this Nazi takeover of America. Your generosity over 10 years, that's right. Netroots Radio has been resisting for 10 years, 24/7, 365 resistance radio. Who does that? Well, we do. And we will continue to do so because of your generosity. And how is that working? Well, if you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink and send those funds to us once a month, we then throw that money into our kitty that we have dug into our own wallets and thrown it into the kitty. We then pay our bills. After stretching those dollars beyond compare, even on the quantum level. Yes, indeed, we leave no strange quark unstretched. And we then pay our bills with those stretched dollars, fly under the radar, continue resisting as the founders originally intended, and thus fulfilling our civic duty. And thank you for your generosity in allowing us to do so. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thanks, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. Why? Well, because I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, and then I get that linked up on Twitter and other social media platforms. They all let me do it except for Facebook. Do not bully Nazis. Facebook doesn't like it. I thought the whole idea of being an American was that you were supposed to bully a Nazi. They're anti-democratic. They want to destroy democracy and thus America. Why is Facebook protecting them? Why? Anyway, follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. And please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Okay, Gunner the English Bulldog is doing a good job as my snoozing sous chef today. Next month, around the 26th, 27th of July, he goes in for his soft palate surgery. Bulldogs have a tendency to have a soft palate issue, and he's dropping food a lot more than he had been, and the snoring is well, it's always been fairly pronounced, but apparently, according to the vet, snoring with a bulldog is also indicative of a soft palate issue. And snoring is not good on the heart for, well, I would say after speaking with the vet, any mammal. You know, it's bad for us, and it's bad for a dog. So he'll be getting a procedure to, I guess, snip some of the soft palate. It sounds icky. The vet assures me it's not as bad as it sounds, and he will be feeling a lot better. And he won't be dropping as much food, so that's good too. All right, so work on, Gunner. Work on. Let's delve into, well, you know, since we're in a salon and we have this culinary motif, let's tuck into this first offering. In the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, it comes out of the Associated Press, and it looks like anonymous staff have put this together. A federal judge threw out a lawsuit filed by employees of a Houston hospital system over its requirement that all of its staff be vaccinated against COVID-19. The Houston Methodist Hospital System suspended 178 employees without pay last week over their refusal to get vaccinated. Of them, 117 sued, seeking to overturn the requirement and over their suspension and threatened termination. In a scathing ruling on Saturday, U.S. District Judge Lynn Hughes of Houston deemed lead plaintiff Jennifer Bridges' contention that the vaccines are experimental and dangerous to be false and otherwise irrelevant. He also found that her likening the vaccination requirement to the Nazis' forced medical experimentation on concentration camp captives during the Holocaust to be reprehensible, and that reprehensible is in quotes. Hughes also ruled that making vaccinations a condition of employment was not coercion, as Bridges contended. Bridges can freely choose to accept or refuse a COVID-19 vaccine. However, if she refuses, she will simply need to work somewhere else. If a worker refuses an assignment, changed office, earlier start time, or other directive, he may be properly fired. Every employment includes limits on the worker's behavior in exchange for remuneration. That is all part of the bargain, Hughes concluded. Jared Woodfill, a Houston lawyer representing Bridges and the other clients, promised an appeal because, of course, they do. All of my clients continue to be committed to fighting this unjust policy, Woodfill said in a statement. What is shocking is that many of my clients were on the front line treating COVID-positive patients at Texas Methodist Hospital during the height of the pandemic. As a result, many of them contracted COVID-19. As a thank you for their service and sacrifice, Methodist Hospital awards them a pink slip and sentences them to bankruptcy. Well, you know what? Get the vaccine. You won't get the virus. It's simple. In a Tuesday memo, the hospital system CEO, Mark Boom, said that 24,947 employees had complied with the vaccination requirement and that 27 of the 178 others had received the first of 2-dose vaccines and wouldn't be fired if they got their second. The rest are subject to termination. He also wrote that 285 other employees received medical or religious exemptions, and 332 were deferred because they were pregnant or for some other reason. Michael Ehrman of Reuters brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. The Food and Drug Administration on Friday last said Johnson & Johnson must throw away millions of doses of its COVID-19 vaccine that were manufactured at a problem-plagued Baltimore factory, but also cleared millions more for use. Two sources familiar with the situation told Reuters that the agency had cleared about 10 million doses. The New York Times said that batches being discarded amounted to around 60 million doses, citing people familiar with the matter. Without disclosing or confirming the number of vaccine doses, the FDA said in a news release that it had authorized 2 batches of the vaccine for use, that several other batches were not suitable for use, and that others were being evaluated. The agency said it was not yet ready to authorize Emergent Biosolution Inc.'s plant for manufacturing the J&J vaccine. Production of the vaccine at the Baltimore site was halted by U.S. authorities in April, as reported here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and J&J was put in charge of manufacturing at the plant. One source familiar with the matter told Reuters that the J&J doses are expected to be exported to other countries. The doses are already in vials and ready to use, the other source said. Now, of course, let's be clear, it's not the doses that are supposed to be destroyed, but the doses that have been cleared. Safety concerns about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, paired with flagging U.S. demand for vaccinations in general, have slowed rollout of the one-shot vaccine to a crawl. Close to half of the 21 million doses produced by the United States sit unused. The FDA said its decision allows for the Johnson & Johnson doses to be used in the U.S. or exported. The agency said the drug maker and Emergent must agree that the FDA can share relevant information about the manufacturing of the doses with regulators where the vaccines are shipped. J&J, in a statement, confirmed that the FDA authorized the 2 batches, but did not acknowledge the doses regulators decided should be tossed. The FDA declined to comment beyond its statement. Last month, Emergent Chief Executive Robert Kramer said it was his understanding that there are 100 million doses of J&J's vaccine ready for FDA review, and that regulators had begun the review process. This April, the halt was followed by the discovery that ingredients from AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine, also being produced at the plant at the time, contaminated a batch of the J&J vaccine. AstraZeneca's shot is no longer being made there. An FDA inspection also turned up a long list of sanitary problems and bad manufacturing practices at the Emergent plant. Separately, Europe's drug regulator said that batches of J&J COVID-19 vaccine made for the region around the time the contamination issues were revealed at the Baltimore plant would, as a precaution, not be used. The European Medicines Agency did not say how many shots were affected, but Reuters has reported it involves millions of doses, making it harder for J&J to meet a target of delivering 55 million doses to Europe by the end of June. The Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The nation's largest, most influential doctors group is holding its annual policy-making meeting amid backlash over its most ambitious plan ever to help dismantle centuries-old racism and bias in all realms of the medical establishment. The dissenters are a vocal minority of physicians, including some white Southern delegates who accuse the AMA of reverse discrimination. Oh, if you give them equality, it's discriminating against white culture. Hey, white culture is unseasoned chicken. That's not culture. Please. Dr. Gerald Harmon, the group's incoming president, is a 69-year-old white native of rural South Carolina who knows he isn't the most obvious choice to lead the AMA at this pivotal time, but he seems intent on breaking down stereotypes and said pointedly in a phone interview, this plan is not up for debate. The 6-day meeting that began on Friday is held virtually because of the pandemic. It offers a chance for doctors to adopt policies that spell out how the AMA should implement its health equity plan, but some white doctors say the plan goes too far. Really? Aren't you a doctor? Announced last month, the plan is unusually bold for the historically cautious AMA, acknowledging that racism and white privilege exist in the medical establishment and have contributed to health disparities laid bare during the coronavirus pandemic. Just don't tell any Republican governors because they'll say, that's critical race theory, and you're going to jail because you're the real racist. See how that works? Portions of the plan include the language of critical race theory, referencing the theft of native lands and centuries-old white supremacy. The dissenters took offense and attacked the plan in documents recently leaked online. One leaked draft of a letter intended for AMA executives called portions of the plan divisive, accusatory, and insulting. Listen to this. This is what they wrote. White males are repeatedly characterized as repressive and to some degree responsible for the inequities. Really? Are you saying that white males have not been responsible? This implies reverse discrimination. How many times have I heard that before, you bircher? It was signed by Dr. Claudette Dalton, a member of the AMA's Southeastern delegation, 4 other positions, and 5 state delegations representing 68 AMA delegates. Okay. Dalton said in an email that the draft letter was not sent, but she declined several requests for comment. Critics argue that the plan should be put up for a vote by delegates, but it reflects existing policies. It was developed by AMA executives and staff based in part on measures adopted at previous policy-making meetings. That included a declaration last November that racism is a public health threat. Harmon's effort to knock down stereotypes includes reflecting on his own experiences. He described a recent encounter at a South Carolina hospital with an older black man stricken with COVID-19 pneumonia. The man was getting better, but was not very communicative and offered mostly one-word responses to questions. The man's name was familiar, so Harmon sat down at the bedside and probed. What kind of work do you do? Mechanic. What kind? Jet engines. With an Air Force background, Harmon shared that he knew about jet engines, and the patient perked up. He had worked at a NASA research center in Virginia where Harmon had once been assigned. He was literally a rocket scientist, the doctor said. Harmon acknowledged the racial stereotype behind his initial impression. He said that's the kind of thinking that the AMA wants to confront. But he also noted that he took time to learn more about the patient and to find common ground, something black patients say white doctors often do not do. U.S. physicians, including AMA members, are overwhelmingly white with roughly 270,000 members. The AMA represents just over a quarter of the nation's doctors. All right, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, don't you love it when a plan comes together? For better or for worse, I prefer to put things in boxes. I like identifying trends and tropes, and I'm kooky for categories, so I am embarrassed to learn of a genre that has been right under my nose, of which I was previously unaware, the raunchy teen quest comedy. In the raunchy teen quest comedy, teen guys search for something. A cool party, alcohol, sex with women, one last night together, an object they've quote-unquote borrowed, which they've now lost, even White Castle hamburgers, although those guys weren't teens. In what is frequently a coming-of-age story, raunchy antics ensue. Recently, though, in a break with exclusionary tradition, women have pierced this genre's celluloid ceiling not only to make the raunchy teen quest comedy, but also to center young women as its leads. 2 years ago, Olivia Wilde gave us Booksmart, and now much undercast actor-turned-director Natalie Morales gives us Plan B. In Plan B, Kuhu Verma plays Sunny. She's 17 in a modest South Dakota town and should be studying for the PSATs, but her overprotective single mother is away for business, thus it's time for Sunny to break her good girl ways and have a party and have sex. When day breaks, Sunny finds she has mishandled her barrier method contraception. Thus, with ride-or-die best friend Lupe, played by Victoria Morales, begins a desperate quest for the morning after pill, which Sunny and Lupe find increasingly difficult to get. Raunchy antics ensue, along with heartfelt character moments, and the tonal shifts between the two were a bit abrupt for me, but they never lost me because the vibe between Verma and Morales is so strong. You just love their characters together, so much so that even though Plan B is a complete story with nothing more teased, I wonder about a sequel. And another reviewer had said the same thing. We just want to know what comes next. We want to see more stories with these characters, and we want Natalie Morales to give them to us. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. We humans often navigate using road signs and GPS. Elephants, though, they can navigate over long distances using their incredible memories. An elephant never forgets, right?
But it's also been suggested here and there that maybe olfaction and their exceptional sense of smell is what's critical in these long-distance movements.
Connie Allen is a behavioral ecologist at the University of Exeter in the UK. She and her colleagues investigated that idea by testing African elephants' ability to tune in on a very specific smell, urine. You see, elephants pee a lot, up to 15 gallons a day, and that urine can contain an array of chemical cues. But first, to test all this, the researchers needed some pee. So they headed to a spot along Botswana's Boteti River and waited.
We would wait for elephants to urinate and within 20 minutes go and collect these fresh urine samples.
Then they set up camera traps on 7 elephant trails. You can actually hear an elephant brushing against a bush here. After observing the elephant's natural behavior on those paths, they noticed that a majority of them investigated scents along the trail, especially elephants traveling alone. And that's an indication, the researchers say, that scents may serve as signposts along the trail. Next, they placed those urine samples they'd gathered along the trails, and they found that for at least 2 days, passing elephants trained their trunks on the samples, especially samples from mature adults. That's another indication that scent might be a potent navigational cue. Their findings appear in the journal Animal Behavior. And based on these results, they hope conservationists might be able to use elephant pee as a decoy.
If we can trick elephants into thinking the path of other elephants is going this way, maybe we can redirect them away from at the moment where they are coming into conflict with humans.
They'll just have to see what happens once elephants get a whiff of that plan. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day John L. Lewis called miners who worked for Little Steel coal subsidiaries out on strike. It was an act of solidarity as conditions worsened on steel strike picket lines. The walkout was designed to force the closure of steel mills by stopping the flow of coal. 10,000 workers in as many as 19 mines owned by Republic Steel, Bethlehem Steel, and Youngstown Sheet and Tube dropped their tools. Bethlehem had not been one of the independent steel companies initially included in the Little Steel strike, but workers at its Cambria works in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, walked out in sympathy with railroad workers at Bethlehem-owned Blacklick and Conemaugh Railroad. They had been refused a contract. Striking miners in Johnstown marched to Cambria Works to join the 7-mile stretch of picket lines. In Ohio, the Canton Federation of Labor voted unanimously for a general strike if the newly formed Citizens League attempted to force reopening of the steel mills. SWAC leader Van Bittner threatened to call out another 600,000 miners by week's end if the strike was not settled. John L. Lewis remarked, quote, "Labor is menaced by the force of arms of Republic Steel Corporation. Labor is calling attention to this situation so the law, government, or public opinion can begin functioning before another massacre takes place." UAW President Homer Martin added, quote, "It is our purpose to spread the light of democracy to every part of this land until autocracy and industrial slavery have been driven from the country." But Johnstown civic leaders and town officials had formed a citizens committee and prepared for battle as the miners approached. It seemed there was no end to the anti-strike violence. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 60 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of around 74. Rain showers currently, with more continuing this morning with some sunshine in the late afternoon. Winds will be out of the west-southwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And it looks like since late last night through this upcoming storm dump, we will have about a quarter inch of rain. Partly cloudy skies overnight with lows in the low 50s, winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Partly cloudy skies tomorrow with highs in the mid-70s, winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Confirmed cases of coronavirus, of course, have not been updated, but this is the late Friday total. We will have the updates probably midday to late tomorrow. Confirmed cases now in Jackson County and the southern part of Oregon now stand at 11,400, and deceased remain at 146. Grass pollen is very high in Rogue River proper. The air quality index is good for the region at 19 parts per million. That's pretty darn good. But that daytime UV index is very high at 9. Do take care. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.99 inches. Visibility is down to 4 miles, and relative humidity is at 95%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and everybody knows that is the Weather Underground. London is 83 and partly cloudy. Paris is 87 and sunny. Whoa, get out of town. Everybody gets out of Paris mostly in July and August. It's pretty darn hot already there. Well, Rome is 81 and partly cloudy. Kyiv is 78 and fair. Kabul is 79 and fair. Hong Kong is 80 degrees and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 70 degrees and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 55 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 58 and cloudy with a fog advisory on the bay and offshore. And New York is 67 degrees Fahrenheit with rain showers. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Stab at Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Nicaraguan police arrested and jailed 5 prominent opponents of President Daniel Ortega over the weekend, including one-time rebel allies who denounced the detentions as an assault on democracy. The arrest beginning late on Saturday marked a deepening political crisis in the Central American nation ahead of an election in November in which the leftist Ortega, age 75, is seeking to extend his 14 years as president. Over the past few weeks, a dozen opposition figures have been arrested on orders from Ortega's security apparatus, including 4 declared presidential rivals. Ortega loyalists argue they are only enforcing the law which prohibits would-be candidates from receiving foreign financing or the publication of information the government determines to be false. In statements, the police blame the detainees for seeking to undermine the country's independence and sovereignty, as well as for inciting foreign interference in internal affairs, requesting military interventions, and organizing with foreign financing. The largest raid targeted the leadership of the leftist opposition Unamos party, including its president Suyan Barahona and former General Hugo Torres of the Unamos party. Unamos is made up of many former Ortega allies who fought alongside him in the late 1970s as they drove right-wing dictator Anastasio Somoza from power. Just before he was arrested, the 73-year-old Torres uploaded a video that denounced Ortega for launching a second dictatorship and betraying the values he once championed.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Stephen Holland of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. President Joe Biden said on Sunday yesterday that autocrat Vladimir Putin was right to say that relations were at their lowest point in years, though he suggested that Russia might be weaker than it seemed and that Moscow had overreached in the Middle East. Biden used the G7 summit in the English seaside resort of Carbis Bay to argue that the world's richest democracies now faced an existential threat with autocrats that would define the 21st century. After attending a NATO summit on Monday today, Biden will meet Putin on June 16th in Geneva for a meeting that promises to be a combative encounter after disputes over spying, hacking, election meddling, Ukraine, Belarus, and human rights. Biden, who called the former KGB spy a killer in March, cast Russia as engaging in unacceptable behavior on a range of fronts, but also pointed to Russia's own dilemmas, its post-Soviet economic collapse, what he called overreach in Syria, and problems with COVID-19. Asked why Putin, who has served as Russia's paramount leader since Yeltsin resigned in '99, had not changed despite years of Western sanctions, Biden quipped, "He's Vladimir Putin, indeed." Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up tomorrow for Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.